I am on to see my husband. I'm happy to see my husband. I'm happy.
This is Kenisha Neely, a 38-year-old mother of 3 from Carolina who would tragically be shot dead by her husband moments after she bailed him from prison. After a heartbreaking abandonment by her children's father, Kenisha had spent years raising her daughters on her own. She worked hard, balancing her career and family life. Despite all the triumphs in her life, there was one thing Kenisha longed for: a partner to share her love and dreams with, a companion to complete her family. What she didn't know was her quest for love was going to lead her on a path of no return. In the early hours of August 4th, 2024, deputies would be called to a residence on McCoy Drive in Hoffman, North Carolina, after reports of multiple gunshots. But the sight that awaited them was more than they bargained for. Upon arriving, deputies would approach a locked bedroom door. Inside was the body of Kenisha, riddled with multiple bullet wounds. What made the tragedy even more harrowing was that just moments prior, she had bailed her husband from prison. Little did she know this would set off a chain of events no one could see coming. Before we get into the heart-stopping events that took Kenisha's life, let's rewind and take a look at how a love story, seemingly full of promise, turned into something no one could have ever predicted. Kenisha Neely was born on March 25, 1986 in Rockingham, North Carolina. Growing up, she was surrounded by the love of her family. Her parents instilled in her the importance of family unity, a value she carried throughout her life. She was known by her friends and family as a warm and caring person, always making a strong impression on those who met her. Kenisha's love for her family and her children was at the core of who she was. She had 2 daughters, Aaliyah and Jaliyah, who were the light of her life. However, her journey as a mother was not without struggles. The father of her children had abandoned them, leaving Kenisha to raise her daughters on her own. Despite the emotional weight of being a single mother, Kenisha never let it break her spirit. She was determined to give her daughters the best life she could offer while building a career for herself. Kenisha didn't stop at just surviving. She thrived. She worked as a certified nursing assistant in various clinics and hospitals, all while juggling the demands of raising her children. Her ambition didn't stop there. Seeing her potential in the healthcare field, she enrolled at Capella University to pursue a degree in business administration with a focus on healthcare. She was driven, passionate, and successful in her career. But as much as she excelled professionally, there was still a missing piece in her personal life. A piece that would soon be filled by someone who would ultimately shatter her world. Despite the challenges, Kenisha craved love. She longed for companionship, not just for herself, but for her daughters as well. She wanted a man who could step in as a father figure to her children, someone who would be the partner she had always dreamed of. Little did she know that the next man to enter her life would be someone who would turn out to be her worst nightmare. In 2019, Kenisha was on Facebook, browsing through her feed as she had many times before. That's when she received a message from a man named Moses Chisholms Neely, also known as Moses Chisholms. He was charming, good-looking, and seemingly everything Kenisha had hoped for. Moses and Kenisha quickly struck up conversations, and before long, they were talking every day, getting to know each other better. They shared deep, meaningful conversations, and it didn't take long for them to connect on an emotional level. Kenisha thought she had finally found someone who could fill the void in her life. However, there was a dark secret Moses had been keeping from Kenisha. He had told her many details about himself, but one crucial fact remained hidden. Moses was a convicted felon, serving time in prison for serious crimes, including drug dealing, robbery, and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. But Kenisha didn't know this at first. Their communication had been confined to Facebook messages and phone calls, and Moses was able to hide his prison sentence from her for a while. Eventually, Moses came clean about his situation, revealing the truth about his incarceration. It was a red flag, and many would have walked away at this point. But surprisingly, Kenisha chose to accept him regardless. She convinced herself that everyone deserves a second chance, and the connection she had with Moses was too strong to ignore. As their relationship continued, Kenisha became more and more invested in Moses, even making visits to him in prison. She was determined to be there for him, to help him turn his life around. Despite his past, Kenisha saw a man who could be the partner she had always dreamed of. She wanted to believe in the man he claimed to be, not the one his past suggested. As the months went by, Moses and Kenisha became more emotionally attached, and Moses began to rely on her support more than ever. Despite the warning signs, Kenisha couldn't shake the feeling that this might finally be the love story she had been waiting for. Then, in December 2021, after a period of uncertainty, Moses proposed to Kenisha. The proposal came as a surprise, and Kenisha initially declined because of Moses' incarceration. However, after much thought, she convinced herself that this was the right decision. She agreed to marry him despite his status as a convict. On December 17, 2021, they got married in a small, intimate ceremony with only a few witnesses, including her children. The marriage wasn't traditional. Moses was still behind bars, but for Kenisha, it was a sign of commitment, a step toward building the family she had always dreamed of. Despite the unconventional nature of their marriage, Kenisha posted on social media, sharing her joy with her friends and family. She wrote about how happy she was to be married to Moses, despite the challenges of their situation. She wrote about the love she felt for him and how their connection was something special. But behind the happy posts, Kenisha was struggling. Her marriage was not the fairy tale she had hoped for. Moses' presence in her life was limited to phone calls, prison visits, and the occasional FaceTime call. Her daughters, who had initially embraced the idea of a father figure in their lives, were still without the family dynamic they had hoped for. Despite these difficulties, Kenisha remained optimistic, convinced that Moses was the one for her. She continued to show him love and support, going above and beyond to make him feel special.
How do you know? It ain't even my birthday, it's my birthday.
What? Shut up. Go ahead.
I want my money at the same time.
Go ahead, eat it.
No, eat it! Chew it up and swallow it. Don't throw it up.
I want my money at the same time.
In January 2022, just 1 month after their wedding, Kenisha posted on social media celebrating their 1-month anniversary. She reassured Moses of her love and commitment, writing that she would still choose him even if she had to do it all over again. To show her love, Kenisha even hired a popular singer, Kenisha, to send a special message to Moses on Valentine's Day, expressing her appreciation for him. Moses' release from prison was on the horizon. In September 2022, after serving his time, Moses was set to be released on parole, as long as he continued to behave well in the months leading up to his release. Kenisha was ecstatic. She booked a 5-night stay at a hotel in Atlantic City to celebrate his release, going all out to make the trip special for Moses. She shared her excitement on social media, expressing her joy at the prospect of finally living the family life she had always dreamed of. It seems like everything was falling into place, but the reality was far from what Kenisha had envisioned. The cracks in their relationship began to show when Moses was released in September 2022. Despite their optimism, things took a dark turn. On December 11, 2022, just 6 days before their first wedding anniversary, a 911 call was made to report a domestic dispute at the Neely residence. When police arrived, they found Moses intoxicated and having just assaulted Kenisha. The situation was so severe that Kenisha had to use a firearm to protect herself, which resulted in Moses being shot in the arm. He was taken to the hospital and Kenisha filed charges against Moses. Moses was arrested for second-degree kidnapping and assault. But Kenisha would do something unsettling. Determined to make things work, Kenisha dropped the charges and released Moses from jail. She downplayed the incident, calling it a misunderstanding between a couple. She still believed that they could make their relationship work, no matter the challenges. But what Kenisha didn't realize was that she was trapped in a cycle of abuse and denial. Despite the red flags, she continued to hold on to hope, convinced that Moses would change. Little did she know, things were about to take an even darker turn. On the morning of August 4, 2024, deputies were called to the Neely residence on McCoy Drive in Hoffman, North Carolina, after reports of gunshots and a domestic dispute. When arriving, deputies approached the locked bedroom door, trying to make sense of the situation. It was clear something had gone terribly wrong. As they stood outside the door, they could hear the distinct sound of a single gunshot coming from within. When they forced their way inside, they discovered a heartbreaking scene. Inside the room, they discovered the bodies of 38-year-old Kenisha Neely and her 38-year-old husband, Sheldon Maurice Neely, both with apparent gunshot wounds. Kenisha had been shot multiple times, and Moses had taken his own life. The investigation confirmed that Moses had killed Kenisha before ending his own life in a tragic and violent act. The deputies immediately secured the scene, which was now a crime scene, and began to process the evidence. The investigation into Kenisha's murder had begun, but it wasn't just about gathering physical evidence. It was about uncovering the twisted dynamics that led to her tragic death. The investigation into Kenisha's death moved quickly, with detectives from the Richmond County Sheriff's Department working tirelessly to piece together the events that transpired in the Neely household. The officers first began by interviewing witnesses who had heard the shots and the earlier signs of the domestic dispute. Neighbors reported hearing arguing and strange noises, including a scream just before the gunshot rang out. This would be the beginning of an investigation that revealed the dark undercurrents of the Neely's troubled relationship. Kenisha's children, who had been left orphaned by the violent turn of events, were immediately placed under the care of social services as authorities worked to break the news of their mother's tragic death. While the children's future was in limbo, investigators turned their focus on the events leading up to that fateful morning. What led Moses, a man who had spent a long time in prison, to escalate his abusive behavior to this point? Why had Kenisha not seen the warning signs? The evidence from the scene provided some of the answers. Forensic experts were called to examine the crime scene in detail. They documented the gunshot wounds, collected DNA evidence, and took photographs of the scene. The physical evidence suggested that Moses shot Kenisha at close range before turning the gun on himself. It was a deliberate act of violence, a calculated response to what seemed to be a deteriorating relationship. The investigation also delved into Moses's history and background. It became clear that he had a criminal past filled with violent tendencies. Moses had been incarcerated for several years for a variety of offenses, including drug trafficking, robbery, and possession of firearms. Despite his history, Kenisha had chosen to believe in him, even after learning about his criminal record. This decision would ultimately cost her her life. As the investigation unfolded, detectives discovered that Kenisha had been in an abusive relationship for months before her death. There had been multiple instances of domestic violence, including the violent confrontation in December 2022, just a year into their marriage. On that occasion, Moses had assaulted Kenisha so badly that she was forced to use a firearm in self-defense, resulting in Moses being shot in the arm. Despite this, Kenisha had dropped the charges against him and Moses had been released from jail. It was an alarming pattern that suggested Kenisha was unable or perhaps unwilling to escape the hold Moses had on her. It was not long before the authorities had enough evidence to focus on Moses as the primary suspect. His actions on the morning of August 4th, his history of violence, and the harrowing scene at the Neely home left little room for doubt. Moses was the perpetrator, and the evidence surrounding the crime was overwhelming. The authorities confirmed that Moses had killed his wife before turning the gun on himself. Moses' decision to take his own life ensured that he would not face trial for his actions, leaving the authorities with a significant challenge. While it was clear that he had committed the crime, the arrest had taken place posthumously. The Richmond County Sheriff's Department's investigation confirmed that it was indeed a murder-suicide, closing the chapter on the tragic sequence of events. But it left many questions unanswered. Kenisha's family and community were left to grapple with the aftermath of this loss, still unable to fully comprehend how this tragedy had unfolded. The fact that Moses had taken his own life meant that he would not face justice in a courtroom, yet the damage was done, and the investigation into his motives and actions was complete. Kenisha's family and the community of Hoffman, North Carolina were devastated by her death. Kenisha had been a well-loved and respected member of her community. She had worked tirelessly to provide for her daughters and had been known for her dedication to her career, her love for her family, and her deep desire to offer her children a better life. She even worked as a licensed bail bondsman, showing her compassion for others, even though her own life had been full of challenges. When news of her death spread, it shook the small town to its core. The idea that a woman who had worked so hard to build a life for herself and her children could end up in such a tragic situation was unfathomable to those who knew her. Kenisha's friends and family struggled to make sense of her decision to stay in an abusive relationship, despite the warnings and violent incidents that had taken place prior to her death. Many wondered how they had missed the signs and what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. The community rallied together to support Kenisha's children, who had lost not only their mother, but also their father figure whom they had hoped would take Moses' place. The loss of both parents left them with a future that was uncertain and full of heartache. Social services were involved, and the children were placed with family members while they received counseling and support to help them navigate the loss they had endured. Kenisha's friends and family held a vigil to honor her memory, sharing stories of her life, her love, and her strength. They reflected on how much she meant to the people around her and how her loss had left an irreplaceable void. The grief was palpable as those who knew her best tried to come to terms with the tragic events that led to her untimely passing. Kenisha's funeral took place on August 13, 2024, a date that would forever mark the final chapter of her life. The funeral service was attended by close family and friends who gathered to say goodbye to the woman who meant so much to them. Kenisha had touched many lives, and her loss was deeply felt by all who knew her. The ceremony was a somber occasion, filled with emotional tributes from those who had known Kenisha. Her children, still reeling from the shock of losing their mother, sat with family members, trying to find comfort amid the sadness. The community continued to offer their support, organizing fundraisers to help with funeral expenses and the care of Kenisha's children. During the service, those who loved her spoke of her incredible strength, her selflessness, and the love she had for her daughters.
Kenisha was a special person, and I too met her at Penny Village, all of my girls sitting on the front row. I remember the first time I met Kenisha, she was training me, and I really didn't know too much about being a CNA. And I said, Kenisha, we can't pick this woman up by ourselves. We need a Hoyer lift. She said, girl, we don't need no Hoyer lift. I got her. I said, Kenisha, I can't do it. So I went down the hall to find the Hoyer lift. By the time I got back, the lady was in bed. She was tucked in. The TV was on, and Kenisha was nowhere to be found. And I'm like, Kenisha, why are you so strong? She was so strong, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually. She was just a gift to everybody that met her. She loved Chris Brown. We were supposed to go out and see Chris Brown, and now I don't have nobody to go to see Chris Brown with no more, but I just thank God for just knowing her and just meeting her. And I believe if she was here today, she would say better days are coming. All right.
Despite the tragedies in her life, Kenisha had always carried herself with grace and determination, hoping for a better future for her children. The funeral marked the end of a chapter, but it also reminded everyone of the importance of family, love, and support in times of hardship. Kenisha's story is one of profound tragedy, but it also raises important questions about relationships, red flags, and the dangers of ignoring warning signs. Many people, like Kenisha, enter relationships with the hope of love and companionship, but some, like Moses, use manipulation and control to trap their victims in toxic cycles of abuse. As we reflect on Kenisha's story, we must ask ourselves, how many people are in relationships where control and abuse are present but not immediately recognized? What are the signs of emotional and physical abuse that people should watch out for in their own relationships? How can we ensure that we are supporting those around us who may be trapped in unhealthy relationships? Kenisha's tragic end calls for a deeper understanding of domestic abuse and the importance of intervention. In situations where someone is in danger, it's critical to offer support and resources to help them escape before it's too late. Family members, friends, and even neighbors can play a role in identifying the signs of abuse and offering assistance before it turns deadly. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please reach out to resources such as domestic violence hotlines, shelters, and support groups. No one should have to endure violence in silence, and there are people and organizations ready to help. Domestic violence is preventable, but it takes awareness, intervention, and a commitment to supporting those in need. Kenisha's death, tragic, has sparked conversations about abuse, love, and the importance of looking out for one another. It's a reminder that in relationships, trust, love, and respect are non-negotiable, and when those are violated, the consequences can be catastrophic. Take action now. If you see the warning signs of an abusive relationship, don't ignore them. Speak up, offer support, and help those in need. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.